Hi, you're here, and it's now. And in an hour, it will be the end. So let's not waste any time. I'm talking about the shock of the now, and the anxieties we have about the art of now. How do we evaluate it with all the publicity and hype and money that surrounds it? Let's sort it all out in the next hour. Art, wake up and make sense to me. No, cries Bruce Nauman's video clown, calling out to the art in this exhibition maybe. Inverted, perverted, like an old Beatles song. How do we know if the art of today isn't here today and gone tomorrow, or just an eternal repetition of yesterday?
This is a form of realism. It's a form that came out in the 1960s. Now it's here again, done more extremely, but still more or less the same. It's the shock of the incredibly realistic nose hairs, that stubble, the red of the eyes. It's a kind of freak. You want to go on looking at it, but it's not like art exactly. You might think, wow, that's much better than art, or that's really weird, or really stareable at. But although it's got that incredible high degree of stareability, you don't feel it's got anywhere further to go. And that's really why that kind of art died out in the 1960s. Photorealist painting, photorealist sculpture. So this is like a lot of art now. When you look at it, there's a kind of anxiety. It's not the existential anxiety that's expressed in that incredibly realistic frown. It's the anxiety of repetition, the main anxiety of now, the anxiety of art coming round again and again.
Art comes round again, and when it does, it's surrounded by a load of publicity and hype. That's another anxiety. Glamorous icons in ads and in art galleries. The icons of art, staring out, being glamorous, all meanings merging into one. The first law of advertising, recognizability. The glare of publicity. It cuts right through difficulty, gets right down to impact. Is that all art was, after all? This is the art of the real, we're told. We'd like some realism, but this is the real on a loop, the new surreal.
Sod you, Gits. Men go wild for my body, says here.
The art of now, humming and drumming and click-clacking and tick-tocking towards a future which isn't unknown because it will probably always be like this, like sensation, murderers and minimalism, all making sense together. Glamorous, recognisable, sensational, always in the news. Norman Rosenthal's exhibition of Charles Saatchi's collection of young British art, called Sensation, repeated at a gallery in Berlin. We think of surrealism as modern art revolting against society. We think of sensation as modern art being the same as society, disturbing and violent and going round and being in a black hole. Thank you very much, we say. May I have another?
What do you think sensation has come to stand for? If we talk about, sensation art, or, if you've got an exhibition that's being moved around, it's a kind of sign of something.
Publicity and hype gone mad, I imagine, the general public. I think it's become grotesquely unrepresentative of what people do simply because of the way that it's been presented. And I think there's possibly one or two people in this exhibition for which it fits their the way they work to present it in this way. But I think for a lot of the other people here, it's completely out of their hands.
I'm not sure what I think about all the hype stuff. I mean, insofar as there has been hype, it hasn't done me any harm. But on the other hand, it annoys me a bit because the people see that as something that artists have somehow contrived for themselves rather than something that's happened.
What, that maybe popularity is something that's been imposed on you?
Not imposed, well, I don't know.
Given the twist by the name of this exhibition, which I think Norman originally intended to be something that was also quite sensitive, a sensation could be ice cream on your tongue. But it hasn't. It's become interpreted in the other way, which is that this is something that is sensational.
I'm not trying to deny any responsibility for my part in it, but I think the responsibility for that lies with a lot of people and with the media to a certain extent, and also perhaps with some kind of public appetite for something like that to happen.
I think an image like that is immensely accessible. It's like become an iconic image of the 90s, it's like a defiant woman of the 90s, Sarah Lucas. How do you think that reads, that picture?
I was just thinking I was trying to make a picture of myself with a long ash. But actually to sit there getting a long ash makes, you have to be very, very still for a start, and you get a lot of smoke in your eyes. So most of the pictures just look absolutely terrible. Either I look completely stiff or I was crying my eyes out. So that was the only one that, for God knows why, was usable. I wasn't particularly trying to make a glamorous image.
What does it mean for art to be working now? What kind of work is it actually doing? Dredging up images that tell us what we already know without knowing it. The disgusting, the glamorous. They're already a bit connected. Time takes a cigarette and puts it in the toilet and makes a disgusting art toilet. Publicity, hype, fame, success, the toilet. What genius of the past presides over this insight? Maybe Marcel Duchamp with his urinal as a sculpture, or maybe someone less illustrious, more terrifyingly outside the orbit of right-on cutting-edge art. The artist who wrote reams in his Diary of a Genius on the shape and smell and slitheriness of his morning shit. In the past, anxieties about publicity and fame and money and hype in art were present, but not so emphasised as they are now. Picasso always generated a lot of publicity, and after a certain point, always made a lot of money. But it wasn't until Salvador Dali, or A Vida Dollars, as André Breton called him, that the ugliness and silliness and nonsense of publicity and money and hype in modern art suddenly became difficult to ignore.
Dali never tell a lot, tell only greetings, 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 greetings.
When he was young, Dali was a tortured romantic artist, a friend of poets, full of lofty ideals. Then he became known as a betrayer of them. This is him painting General Franco's niece. It was terrifyingly right off instead of right on. And this is Dali in Al Capone's Cadillac, which he bought because he was so rich. That's the car made into a sculpture in the courtyard of the Dali Museum. I think it was Dali who really first vividly staged all the anxieties of now, so vividly that modern art is sometimes a bit forgetful of him. But there he was for ages, right up until recently, acting the clown. Those words read, Soft Self-Portrait. The full title of this picture is Self-Portrait with Fried Bacon. Modern art... Salvador Dali is modern art's big problem. Everyone has heard of him. Many people own books of his works or reproductions of his pictures. As soon as he started becoming really famous, in the 1940s, when this picture was made, when he started being a star in America and Alfred Hitchcock was getting him to do the dream sequences for his films, the hardcore modern artists rejected him. They said he was only a publicity seeker. He was only commercial.
Je suis fou du chocolat Lanvin.
He certainly was the 20th century's biggest success as far as commercialism in modern art goes. People are queuing up to look at his rubbish every day. When he met Sigmund Freud, who he'd always claimed as an influence, and started ranting onto him about his dreams and fantasies, Freud coolly told him he was more interested in the contents of his conscious mind than he was in the contents of his unconscious mind. The implication usually drawn from this story is that for Freud, there was some shysterism going on with Dali. I don't think Dali was a phony, though. In fact, I look up to him, up to his moustache high above, and I admire him for being an artist who followed his impulses. His impulses told him not to paint like Picasso, but to paint pseudo-masterpieces that look like Renaissance art instead, and to have an outrageous interview style.
There's already 3 consecutive years of work. And today start again and probably miraculously achieve one masterpiece in the 3 or 4 next hours of time. Butterfly.
Dali expressed the modern world by acting its weirdness. He was an inspired allegorist. And I don't put down his brushwork either. It's not like anyone could paint like that. He was a priest of art, preaching timing, genius, money.
Bravo, 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 bonjour, bonjour. You know, Salvador Dali, myself, is very rich. And Dali loved tremendously money and gold.
What do you really ask out of each day?
Dali sleep the best after one day of work, receive one tremendous quantity of checks.
But the things that Dali stands for, outrageous behaviour, always going for the big bucks, always doing a type of modern art that may have been strange but was never abstract, was always gettable by ordinary people, these are the very things that have propelled contemporary British art into the mainstream of pop culture.
In the modern art system, the main division is thought to be Picasso and Marcel Duchamp, Expressionism versus Conceptualism. In the cutting-edge art world of today, Duchamp is thought to have won that battle, but Dali is the high priest with truths to tell, truths about what we're looking for, what we want. His is a mad act that seems more and more realistic, more and more connected to us. Freud didn't necessarily mean there was nothing behind Dali's images. Maybe he meant he quite liked them, and he really was interested in how Dali used his conscious mind to think them up, like the images he thought up in collaboration with Luis Buñuel for their film Un Chien Andalou. Fame, money, success, genius. Dali's big subjects, and ours.
And the winner is?
The winner of the 1996 Turner Prize is
Rachel Whiteread.
Damien Hirst.
Douglas Gordon.
Bruce Ophelia.
What can I say?
What can I say?
Where's my check?
Yes! 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 Yes!
I want to thank the Tate Gallery, my dentist.
Such is the culture we live and work in.
Thank God.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
If you want to be a successful artist, there's so many other people who want to be successful artists too. You have to be so ambitious, you have to be so hardworking and so committed and everything that there's always going to be someone more ambitious than you.
Peter Davis is a British artist. He's 27 years old. That's the age Picasso was when he painted Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. Davis became famous about a year ago for doing jokey lists of artists with numbers by the names, as if showing a kind of pecking order of famous and less famous artists. It's the sort of thing you could imagine as a conversational aside if artists were talking amongst themselves, but not at all as the subject of a work of art, especially not one 30 feet long like this. But that's exactly what Davis does with it. He does artists' top 10s or top 100s. This is his hip 100. It shows the artists' names with the thing that they do beside the name. Bruce Nauman at number 9, Double No. John Currin at number 8, Big Tits and Beardy Blokes. And there's Jeff Koons at 56, Giant Flower Power Puppy. A lot of these artists, though, are just up-and-coming young British artists who would only be known within the London art world. They're mixed up with world-shattering giants of modern art. So it couldn't possibly be everybody's hip 100. And maybe it isn't even Peter Davis's hip 100 all the time.
Davis's paintings seem annoying to many people because they don't pretend to be about anything more important than insider gossip. They seem somehow short-circuited as art, but are they really? The clock's ticking, and I'm thinking about that Bruce Nauman clown from 15 minutes ago. 15 minutes of fame. Nauman is at the top of Davis's top 100 list. Maybe because Nauman's 15 minutes keep coming round again and again.
I thought he was a really important artist in terms of like the last 10 years and in terms of, you know, this generation of British artists perhaps that were kind of well known at the time when I made the painting. But I also wanted this kind of feeling that it was like saying this is the most important artist in the world, period. So that's like now and forever, but by next week I might be thinking, well, no, actually he's not. So I'd start doing the painting. By the time it was finished, kind of a month later, I'd already thought, well, this person should be higher, this person should be lower. I can't believe that person's there.
Do you think that the nature of fame and the nature of celebrity, which in the hierarchy of big ideas and the hierarchy of things that make life important would seem to be quite low, is actually surprisingly and horribly up the top there in modern life, and especially in contemporary art?
It's kind of funny, it's silly, but actually I'm really obsessed by it. And so I kind of wonder if, I mean, there must be a lot of people who aren't so obsessed by it, but I think a lot of people are. You could say someone, oh, who's the most important artist of the 20th century, and they might say Picasso, they might say Duchamp. No historian or academic or anyone can agree on who it is. It seems ludicrous to. And yet there's always a sense of, in a kind of quite a faddy way, that there is an artist of like now or whatever. And what interests me is that like you get some artists who might kind of emerge very quickly. Like say Shaun Landis, for example, you know, fantastic artist and makes work which makes all kinds of different work and work which kind of really sums up a lot of things which people are feeling about the world now. But, you know, they kind of come and go. So there might have been a point when, in a kind of way, he was the most important artist in the world. But when was that point?
The little seaside town of Cadaqués, where Dali was born and where he died in 1987. He's not on any of Peter Davis's hip lists, but he would be on mine. This is a room in his former home, next to the dressing room of his wife, Gala, who he famously never had any sex with, but only masturbated over, while she had sex with others. Dali, the great masturbator, and the great cracked actor in our drama of now. Here's Gala's dressing room, still lined with Dali pictures. Not pictures of burning giraffes or crawling ants or faces metamorphosing into bowls of fruit, but the real pictures, pictures that cry out like Dali did as the clock ticked towards the end of his life. Greetings, greetings, greetings. Greetings to publicity and fame and money and hype and repetition. Repetition, 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 repetition. When did the now start? I think it was the 1980s. That's when our system of understanding things by repeating them seemed to really get going. Were we understanding them or emptying them out? We still don't know. And is it a coincidence that that was also the time when it first became quite widely accepted that everybody expected to live an ideology-free lifestyle? And artists did too. This is the New York office and studio of one well-known artist of the 80s, an artist who stands like a giant at the gates of now, with his back to the past, always positive, never anxious. And this is his workshop. In the 80s, he saw banality everywhere, and he thought it should be embraced, like a cuddly kitten. He saw art as equilibrium, as everything levelled. It was something that people should love, like they loved anything, like babies and sunshine, and smiling. His name is Jeff Koons. No one's thought about Jeff Koons for a few years, but now he's back. He's been given the job of being our society's Michelangelo, expressing our dreams. Kittens and puppies and cakes and flowers and these blobs representing a mound of Play-Doh, a pod. What vision of the equilibrated future will come out of that? And in here is his Sistine Chapel.
Jeff, I think of you as an enormous star of the 80s associated with this body of work that showed vacuum cleaners that was called The New, which he in fact started making quite early in the 80s, but it became very well known in the mid-80s. So from 20 years ago, you've been dealing with the concept of the new. Is it kind of an anxiety to keep coming up with something new?
No. You know, within the art, I never have anxiety in life. There are other areas in life that I can become anxious about, but never about making art.
So you were never frightened when you fell into that role of being what people thought of as the latest thing? You're never frightened that you couldn't keep that up?
No. I would say the new was much more art world conscious, much more conscious of 20th century art, Duchampian work.
What are your memories of the 80s?
I guess being really surprised how much attention was being paid to art. In the United States, we're not used to it. Culturally, artists aren't held in maybe the same esteem that they are in Europe.
And suddenly, in the 80s, they became stars.
And I really realized that things were really, there was no logic to me when some people, some collectors that I knew from Hollywood, were starting to talk about artists and saying that they're really bigger stars than the Hollywood stars.
It's been a long time coming, Koons' new work, and Hollywood is the association. It's like the agony and the ecstasy, with the Pope played by Rex Harrison, always calling up to Michelangelo, when will it be ready? When will it be ready? And Michelangelo, played by Charlton Heston, calling back, soon, soon. The assistants slave away.
I work with people really in the line of being a producer, and so I'm always overseeing everything. So it's always just exercising control of watching and teaching really what you want, and then being sure that it's followed through. If I have certain gifts as an artist, one I think would be this trust, but the other is a very good eye. And I really think there are very few people who, know me as an artist that wouldn't also say that I have a very good eye.
Koons' good eye sees the world, sees the kitsch that the world loves, sees the modern art that hates kitsch, and makes them all shine and gleam as one. It's what we want, a new religious icon. A good, stiff dog. Koons' giant puppy made of flowers, as big as a 5-story building, getting its weekly pruning.
Puppy has 60,000 live growing flowers, and it has 114 separate irrigation, fertilization systems, and so the technology of it is very sophisticated. But I really wanted to make a piece that just people would really feel a sense of warmth, of love. I think the piece very much has to do with the relationship with God. One of the important parts about Puppy is the sense of exercising one's control where one can. Choosing the color of the flowers, choosing the heights, and the richness. But then it's really, you know, it's out of everybody's hands. It's in the hands of nature then, and some plants are going to shoot off this way, and others are going to start to dominate. And the public really has taken the piece to heart. I mean, to them, you know, I'm told by many people, it's like their Statue of Liberty.
Jeff Koons is a weird prophet, a seer, like Salvador Dali. They do a lot of saying things which we don't believe they really mean. We call it irony, but it turns out they do, and it's actually sincerity. They're sincere about what they feel as artists and what they see. To be a prophet, you have to be connected to the world, but somehow rise above it too. I've come up here to rise above it as far as I can and do some philosophizing. It's the view from the Empire State Building with all the strife and turmoil below. The humans and their million stories. What do they want, these ants with their systems, trying to get happiness, trying to get meaning in their lives? They want creativity and dreams and a route to transcendent meanings and entertainment and a few laughs. Art can provide these things, we think, but is the art we have now even still art, really? Is it some new thing, cut off forever from the past, even the modern past, and just turning the past over?
Art is an expression of the world and a response to it. It uses bits of materials that come from art itself and bits of materials that come from the world, from life or whatever. We live in an age of recycling, where everything comes around again. In the movies, in music, in fashion, in politics. So it makes sense that it should be the same for art. That's a good, positive way of looking at the art of now. On the other hand, it's hard to avoid a bad, nagging, negative way of looking at it. The feeling that maybe modern art came to an end at some point and is now only lingering on artificially.
The artist who painted these paintings is Philip Taff, like Koons, a fashionable, successful artist of the 80s. Today he paints nature and abstractions, both things that aren't fashionable. In the 80s he painted other people's paintings, or the general look of them. He redid them in new ways, like his redone Bridget Riley's. Bridget Riley's op art of the 1960s. Riley moved on to new things and forgot about the past, but then her old 60s self was revived in the 80s by Philip Taff. That must have been creepy for her. Why did he do that?
I essentially really had to understand how this work operated perceptually.
How Bridget Riley really worked.
How it really works. So what I did was to actually dissect the image and reassemble it. So it was almost a kind of action of cultural vivisection, taking something apart, cutting into it literally. And I thought that I needed to get inside of the work literally to come to terms with the meaning of this icon. Representing something, reliving something, there was a value in that. As a priest would celebrate Mass, or
so this
it would be a religious ritual.
So this is partly almost a surgical object and partly a religious object.
It's
and partly art.
Yes, it's surgical and quasi-religious icon.
Why do you think in modern art and more in contemporary art, things come round again and again? There's so much repetition that the same imagery comes, the same notions come, the same ideas seem to come round again and again.
It's a question of practice. It's a question of relearning and revisiting and rethinking certain ideas over and over and over again to articulate things in new ways or stronger ways. Or
so it's not always irony, it's not always a joke, it's not always forgetfulness.
I think it's a process of investigation and research. Research involves experiments that are repeated and tried again and again, testing.
This is the Museum of Modern Art, where we've been repeatedly throughout this series. Repeating things is really a normal idea for art. We don't want to think it is because we believe in the value of originality. After all, it's the Museum of Modern Art, not the Museum of Endless Repetitions or the Museum of Slight Variations. We expect the modern to be new every time, but in reality, the new is never all that new. When an instruction is repeated again and again, the meaning can go blank. It can become meaningless. But when art repeats, it doesn't always mean that. Inside the Hayward Gallery in London, there's a Bruce Nauman exhibition going on. Nauman, what an excellent surname for this programme. He's about the human condition. Run from fear, fun from rear. Let's spin around with him and see what condition our condition is in. This is Nauman, how he looks today. He's been an art star for 30 years. Bruce Nauman is all about words, whether written down or shouted or called out across a gallery space. Ideas and images all coming together to make art. This is young Nauman in the 1960s, doing the kind of thing that has made him perhaps the most significant and most influential artist of the 1990s. This work is called Art Makeup. It shows Nauman covering his body in different coloured theatrical makeup: white, pink, green, black. It's a work that's all implication, nothing definite, except it does contain the definite suggestion of the idea of the artist each day having to make up from scratch what art is.
Oh, Pete and Repeat were sitting on a fence. Pete fell off. Who was left? Repeat! Oh. Pete and Repeat were sitting on a fence and Pete fell off. Who was left? Repeat! Oh. Pete and Repeat were sitting on a fence and Pete fell off. Who was left? Repeat!
This is a cacophony of overlaid chantings coming out of a huge head. It's the words of the title all mixing together and repeating in a horrible drone.
Feed me, anthropology.
Feed me, eat me, anthropology. Help me, hurt me, sociology. It's Bruce Nauman's view of existence. This work is like a beautiful modern art opera. It's stunning, dramatic, dizzying, even though its content is that life is grim and hopeless and a living hell, and all we can expect from others is violence and sadism, or to be devoured. Nauman's art fits right in with the trendy art of today, but he doesn't. He lives in the desert in America, near Albuquerque, on a ranch, equidistant between Los Alamos, Las Vegas and Roswell, where the alien sightings are. Atom bombs, gambling and aliens. He wears a big hat and rides a horse, and then sits in his ramshackle studio with the messes on the floor and thinks up ideas for art. This is another recent Nauman in the basement of a museum in LA. The head in a void, an existential cliché. He was a guitarist in a jazz band when he was young. It was the 1960s. Beatnik poetry, modern music, modern dance, Jackson Pollock, Andy Warhol. They were all in the air then, spinning. He studied engineering, was impressed by the idea of the elegant solution. He liked to leave off when enough was done, so his art's always got a rough and ready look. These heads cast in wax, the stuff in the mouth and ears to keep the wax out, left in, looking horrible, but functional and ordinary too. Art's just coming out of his head. Pacing up and down the studio as a young graduate, watching the neon beer sign across the street flickering on and off. This is life, he thought. Make art from it. We're in prison. It's the complete end of the series, so pay attention. And it's the millennium. Every image is alarming, every second a thunderclap. Time. We can't do anything about it. There's no use complaining. That's the subject of this artist's work. He sets up live relays of situations, empty rooms with the clock ticking. You can't get any more now than that.
No, it's actually a very quiet time.
From a prison, he once set up a live feed running into an art gallery. The transmission lasted 90 minutes, until the empty cell was needed for a new prisoner to be banged up.
A very close friend of mine ended up in prison. They never forget the first night, and they always talk about the sound. And it's the sound that kind of makes the prison. I mean, we're here in an empty prison at the moment. Sound just travels incredibly.
Yeah.
It's a very formalist piece of architecture.
So when you've got a lot of noise and a lot of clanging and a lot of shouting.
And a bigger prison, a working prison, a prison with so much energy, where everybody's overcrowded and rammed in. It's overcrowding, it's incredible. I was very specific. I wanted the cell to be empty in a working prison. I didn't necessarily want to focus in on somebody's personal tragedy.
Once he broadcast a film of his studio into a gallery. It was a live broadcast, just the studio with nothing happening in it, except time passing.
It was set up by the BBC from my studio, and it was broadcast via a very complicated set of satellite dishes all across London to a disused shop in Exmouth Market in the east side of London from my studio in the west. There's a still shot of my studio. In the middle of the frame, on the back wall, there was an industrial flip clock. The microphone was inside the flip clock, so every minute you saw this life-size image of my studio, then crash, overcame the time. You'd wait and wait and wait, then another minute would arise, smash.
So apart from that, nothing else was happening?
Apart from that, nothing else happened. It was a completely empty studio. I stayed away from the studio. And the next satellite link is going to be the moon. So it's a live link with the moon. And it will probably be in California, but the moon is the clock.
Right, because the moon does the time.
Exactly. Well, time began with the moon, our studies of the moon.
So time connects all these things, the time of the studio, the artist's studio, the time of a prison,
Yep.
another kind of time, and ultimate time, which is the moon.
The moon, yeah. You could do the same setup in any location. You could go into an operating theatre and watch somebody die.
That would be horrible.
Real-time art, about doing time, until reality steps in, the new prisoner arrives, and the art has to stop. Reality is what new art has to adjust to. It's adjusting all the time. It's working overtime to keep up. One thing that still exists, though, is painting. Painting with palette knives and brushes and turpentine and linseed oil. It's amazing, it just won't die. John Currin is a New York painter. He paints like Courbet. But it's Courbet meets the New Yorker cartoon. It's 100% kitsch. All the painterly pleasures and values we love so well, all present but not correct. Offensively incorrect, in fact. But there's something amazingly accurate about it. It pinpoints what we want from painting without knowing we want it, or we would never admit that these are the things we want. It's accurate about all sorts of stereotypes. Like this older woman, sensitive, liberal, concerned, maybe an art lover. Maybe she'd buy a painting like this and then sell it to Saatchi, and then Saatchi would sell it again in one of his sales and make more money to go with the money he already makes from making ads.
It's never been my intention to kind of be ironically lowbrow.
But you're aware that this would have an appeal to sort of uncultivated taste as much as it might do to a highbrow taste.
All figuration is basically, figuration is an obvious, like narrative in movies or something, rather than making Godard movies, making a Hollywood movie. It's going to appeal to more people, and it's going to be therefore considered lowbrow and obvious, not as smart, more right-wing, all those kind of associations. Like this painting, a menopausal kind of woman. She's also cultured like an elite. In other words, the kind of person that looked down on my work at the time I was making it.
What kind of painting would you say that was?
Partly this painting was meant to be less subtle, obviously, than my other work, and in a way to kind of ruin consciously start out with a failed irony or like a failed bad boy stance or right. You know, it would just be so much of a lame joke. You tell the big joke, nobody laughs, and then like there's this awful silence that goes on for sort of the rest of the painting. In 30 or 40 years, it'll look pretty clearly like from the decade that it was made, and that's either a good thing or a bad thing. I think you can't escape that. If it was, no matter how consciously you try to sort of expand out of your time, I think you're always pretty dated. And you know, great art is dated as much as terrible art.
Track along these grungy spaces with me now as we approach the end of the programme. Inside all of them are art galleries. This one is a former betting shop. Art changes because it's always responding to real things, the reality outside of art and the reality outside of art galleries. Nowadays, art galleries themselves are more and more mixed up with reality. There are still a lot of classic, gleaming white cube art galleries, like this one. But now there are just as many grungy, run-down, old self-help amateur galleries and art spaces run by artists. It's the cult of the warehouse gallery, which started in the 80s. It led to the huge popular explosion of successful young British art, and weirdly, it came out of Thatcherism. Out of the blue, Tory blue maybe, and into the black. Plenty of money for the new Bankside Tate Gallery, which will open in 2000. A converted former power station, it's the ultimate warehouse space, symbol of cool Britannia, the new love affair between modern art and new labour. The new Tate Gallery will be an enormous display of the new. Everything that is glossy and current will shine in the huge white antiseptic space that this construction site will soon become. Vast crowds will stream through like Nuremberg rallies of the now, saluting the new. It's a big change in our culture. Will Damien Hirst be seen as the star of the change, like Jackson Pollock was seen as the star of the last big change? What was that change anyway? We can't remember, because we've changed so much. The ghosts of our former selves shimmer on this new art launching pad, carrying our old ideas out to an old skip somewhere.
I'm walking towards a branch of New York's famous Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain. It's the world's newest contemporary art museum. It was designed by the Los Angeles architect Frank Gehry, and it's an example of postmodern architecture at its most quintessential. It's like a titanium spaceship, nutty, silly, undignified, deliberately undignified, because that's what postmodern architecture kind of is, and it's no use getting angry about it. And it houses the achievements of post-war American art. All the different meanings of that period of art, the historical meanings, meanings that depend on an understanding of subtle distinctions between one artwork and another artwork, even between one movement and another movement, movements which are themselves subtle distinctions, like the difference between post-minimalism and minimalism. All that meaning puzzle is, in this context, reduced down to nothing, or at least to one thing: big, global, corporate display. That's an irony that perhaps isn't lost on the conceptual artist Lawrence Weiner, whose work here consists of a single word on the gallery wall, the word reduced. In silver letters, the letters enlarged 20 feet high.
This is the inside. It's all curves, an amusing parody of the original Guggenheim in New York, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright in the 1930s. Looking around here now at this Guggenheim spin-off, I start to think about what the New York Guggenheim really stands for now. It's a thought that winds and flows right through this building, like this giant Richard Serra sculpture winds and flows through the centre of it. Since the 1980s, the Guggenheim Museum has been a new type of modern art museum, the only type that is likely to survive, we're told. Art museums in the future will all be like it. It's all about global partnership, opening up branches all over the world, getting money from foreign governments to keep the whole enterprise going, getting bigger and bigger in order to get more money to keep getting bigger and bigger. That's why it's global. It goes round and round. It's an idea of space that favours certain types of art, big types. The other types can go somewhere else. Today this museum is empty because it's closed, but most days it's crowded. It's the most popular spot in the city. It's a symbol of modern art's new popularity. Here's a work in the museum by Jenny Holzer, another big star of the New York art world of the 80s. She does words. They started out on t-shirts and then got more and more high-tech. Protect me from what I want, they said. Money creates taste. Abuse of power comes as no surprise. The tone is half sharp, half hippy-dippy. The idea is that in responding to them, your own ideological beliefs will be exposed. The fact is, when it comes to the art of now, you have to get up your own Empire State Building in your own head and have your own overview. It's the last lap, the final stage of our inquiry into now. Dali, our leader, watches over us. The virile moustache, the familiar eyes. Time devouring the last minutes of this series. But art multiplies anyway and goes forth and comes first for the Turner Prize. Dali lying in state, not dead yet, oracular truths from the big lips of his Mae West sofa in his front garden. Dali checking I was getting the thoughts right. The virile power of thought, spouting, surging into the fountain of wisdom. Bruce Nauman as a fountain, his youthful homage to Marcel Duchamp's urinal called Fountain. The great wide field of modern art, from Picasso to now, the new sons and the dead dads, not that it's all men, of course. And the artists we started out with an hour ago, there really might be a realism in his photorealism, a movement repeated, a real thing made marvellous, his own dad, dead. Death, the big meaning of art now. However much Saatchi buys our stuff, we will die, it says, and then there will be nothing. But no, an art angel, another sculpture by Ron Muke. Excitement still swelling after the final curtain's gone down. Et in Arcadia ego, even in paradise I am. However suspicious and blank and empty and repetitious contemporary art might seem, hope might be here. And marvels, and a few laughs. Yes.
We hope you enjoyed This is Modern Art. You can find the book from the series at ABC shops and centres. In a moment, a look at war in Europe for next week. And Sunday afternoon, join Andrea Stretton for a wonderful mix of programmes, including Robert Hughes' American Visions and Beethoven's Symphony No. 4. Sunday afternoon with Andrea Stretton from 1:30. Coming up, Late Line.